The Department of English, Government College Kottayam, greets and welcomes you to this gathering. The webinar series on negotiating gender critical perspectives, for which we are gathered here online, will commence a few minutes from now. The webinar series, being organized by the various departments of Government College Kottayam, was formally inaugurated on 20 January 2021 by Dr. Sabu Thomas, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi University. So, we will get straight into the opening session now. Our resource person for the day is Dr. Jamie Chitra KS, Assistant Professor of English, Government Arts and Science College, Waipin. Government College Kottayam, established in 1972, is the only government-owned arts and science college in Kottayam district. The government college was re-accredited by NAC with A grade in 2016. The Department of English, an integral part of the institution, is privileged to host the webinar series on negotiating gender critical perspectives. To be one among the group and to guide them at the same time is one of the finest qualities of a leader. With great pleasure, I call upon the captain of our ship, the head of our department, Professor M.S. Somarajan sir, to welcome the gathering.
Respected Principal, Dr. R. Prakash, the resource person for the day, Dr. Jamie Chitra, faculty members, scholars and students from various colleges, my dear colleagues and dear students. It's a special occasion for me, my colleagues and students of the Department of English, as we are hosting a webinar for the first time. The department has been organizing national seminars on a regular basis over the past few years. But this year, because of the COVID pandemic, we are not in a position to organize a national seminar. So we have decided to organize this webinar, and the theme for this year's webinar series is negotiating gender critical perspectives. Because of the present scenario, we have been able to organize only this webinar, and we received support from various quarters to make this happen. The coordinator of the IQAC, Dr. Senojos, my dear colleagues from other departments, Dr. Anish from the Geology Department, Sijo from Botany Department, and Ranjit of Chemistry Department, Commerce Department, came up with technical support for making this seminar happen. The technical team of the department, comprising students from various classes, also put in a lot of effort to make this happen. Without their support, this seminar would not have materialized. So now I would like to begin the task that is assigned to me. That is to welcome one and all to this program. First of all, I would like to welcome the principal of the college, Dr. R. Prakash. In fact, it was his idea that all the departments should host a webinar during this year. And we made all the arrangements to make this seminar happen. Dr. Prakash is actively involved in all the activities of the college, and he is sincere in improving the academic quality of the college. So, on behalf of all the participants, I welcome you, sir, to this function. The resource person for the day is Dr. Jamie Chitra. She is an eminent scholar and translator, and the Assistant Professor of English, Government Arts and Science College, Waipin. On behalf of the Department of English, and the participants, I welcome you, Madam, to this webinar. Welcome you, ma'am. Now, faculty members and scholars from various institutions have joined this program through Google Meet and YouTube Live. I welcome all the participants to our program. The colleagues of the department have put in a lot of effort to make this happen, especially the coordinator of the webinar, Lakshmi PS. I welcome Lakshmi and other colleagues, Lakshmi Nair, Estella, Ani, and Niranjana, to this inaugural function. The students of the department, who are the real beneficiaries of the webinar, are also participating online. So, I welcome all my dear students to this webinar series. I conclude by welcoming one and all to this gathering once again. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for those warm and energizing words. With great respect and love, I invite the principal of our college, Dr. R. Prakash, who is well known for being an industrious administrator, to address the virtual meeting.
So, good morning all. It is very nice to see you all, even through this online linkage. And also it is a very peculiar and interesting moment to addressing a bunch of students, researchers, and teachers in and around Government College, Kottayam. The topic selected for today's seminar is very interesting, and it's a very current topic also. Negotiating gender critical perspectives. It's a series of seminars. Lecture 1, Lecture 2, Lecture 3, three prominent and young personalities from different colleges, and the first one is starting today, and it will be handled by Dr. Jamie Chitra from Vipin Government College, and the second one is Fatima from Krishnamenan Memorial College, Kannur, and Shalini Mule Chanil from Central University of Kerala. Three prominent personalities, young researchers, and very good teachers also. So it will be very beneficial for the students to understand the nature and behavior and the problems faced by the transgenders from the society today. A short period means a short period. From that only, our society starts to recognize the transgenders. Wherever we go, the transgenders in the near past and before that, they facing very difficult situations from their family, from the society, from the lawmakers. Wherever they go, they're facing difficult stigmas. But nowadays, the governments, whether it is a state government or central government or worldwide, they recognize that these people also should be lifted by giving proper opportunities. In Kerala, the Kerala government promoting them by providing job opportunities as well as providing awareness programs to them. And the awareness program also for the society to lifting the transgenders. Once how the society lifting the downtrodden people and also women throughout the world. So, about 100 years back, when we are looking the lifestyle of downtrodden peoples and women, they also facing similar problems those days. But those peoples lifted successfully to a new height with the support of the society as well as the support from the governments. So it is very proper to mention here to how to live these transgenders through proper guidance and awareness program. This seminar also is a kind of awareness program for the students to accommodate the interest of transgenders like ordinary human being. Nowadays, in our colleges, the government providing a specific number of seats for the transgenders and providing hostel facilities. So these things are, even it is very little to lift them, but it is a starting point to lift the transgenders and also to change the mindset of the society to recognize the transgenders. That is a very important point. Our mindset should be changed. And the society never recognized the transgenders as human beings. So that mindset, if changed, definitely the transgenders can live in the society with proper dignity. Recent past, we read news in the newspapers. Dr. V.S. Priya, she is the first transgender doctor in Kerala, and he says her words. It's very interesting and very powerful words, and she says that unlike other transgenders, I was privileged enough to have my parents help me achieve my dream of transitioning. My parents supported me both mentally and financially. And for that, I will be always grateful to them. These are the words of Dr. V.S. Priya. So whenever the society, especially the family members, if supporting the transgenders properly, they will lift it to a new height. This seminar, the Department of English doing a good job. It's a very grateful job that it's normally every department choosing a topic from their subjects. This may be included in your syllabus, but it is very interesting to have a topic like this to energizing, encouraging, and make enthusiasm among the students to means sharing their feelings and knowledge and ideas with transgenders like other human beings. So it is very very powerful topic as well as very interesting topic. I congratulating personally and also as a principal the Department of English at this moment for selecting this powerful topic. And also I wish you all for a happy, encouraging day and having a good seminar also from this seminar series 1, and wish all faculty members of Department of English and coordinator, IPSC coordinator, for encouraging the Department of English to organizing such a wonderful program. And I wish all the best of this all the best. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. I invite Ms. Lakshmi P.S., a cherished member of our department and the coordinator of the web series, to introduce the webinar topic.
Good morning. The Department of English, Government College, Kottayam is hosting a webinar series, Negotiating Gender, Critical Perspectives, with the view of introducing students to feminism and gender studies as academic disciplines. We do not know to consider human beings as neutral. We always think of them as women or as men, and this aspect of human identity shapes our interactions with them. We know that masculine and feminine are not the only gender identities. Still, we continue to consider them as the natural gender identities and relegate non-binary gender identities to subordinate positions. Gender differences are to be perceived as an aspect of patriarchy, a social formulation in which men occupy a dominant position with respect to women and other gender identities. When there is power operating in human relations, there will naturally be resistance to power. It is this resistance to patriarchy and male domination that has evolved as feminism and later as gender studies in various parts of the world. We at the Department of English thought it would be relevant to introduce students to feminism and gender studies because gender is so real. It influences us in unfavorable ways. We have 3 lectures in this series spread across the months of January, February, and March. Our resource persons are Dr. Jamie Chitra, Dr. Fatima, and Dr. Shalini. They are academicians and translators. They'll be focusing on their areas of experience, expertise, and interest to discuss gender with us. Dr. Jamie will focus on gender through its depiction in literature. Dr. Fatima will be discussing gender as a woman translating men's works. Our 3rd lecture in this series will focus on gender studies as an academic discipline. Dr. Shalini will introduce us to the various areas of gender studies. I hope this webinar series will be a great experience to each one of us. Also, I believe these lectures will enable us to negotiate our gender in our personal and social spaces in a better way. Wish you great learning. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, ma'am, for those enchanting words. Dr. Lakshmi Alnaya, the research enthusiast of our department. It is my pleasure to welcome you, ma'am, to chair the session.
Good morning, everyone. It's with immense pleasure that I welcome to our midst our resource person for the inaugural lecture of our webinar series, Negotiating Gender, Critical Perspectives. Dr. Jamie Chitra is the Assistant Professor of English at Government College, Waipin. She is a researcher, a feminist scholar with several national and international publications to her credit. She obtained her doctoral degree from Sri Shankaracharya University, Kalari, and her thesis focused on body politics with a special reference to women's poetry and is titled The Politics of the Body, Translating Women's Poetry. She is also a translator, and her most commendable work in this area is the translation of the 20th century Mexican painter Frida Kahlo's illustrative diary, which documents the last 10 years of her turbulent life. The translation is titled Vedinagaldeem Kamanagaldeem Udyanathil. Today, Dr. Jamie will be talking to us on reading gender in literature. Welcome, Dr. Jamie.
Thank you. I hope you all can hear me. Thank Department of English and Government College, Kottayam for inviting me for this talk on gender. And I also congratulate you for organizing a seminar or webinar on this topic, particularly for UG students, because it's valid. Otherwise, always the talk on gender or gender studies are for UG students or for researchers, not for UG students. It's for PG students or for researchers. So to introduce that to UG students is always great. So I congratulate you, Department of English and Government College Kottayam, for organizing such a webinar for UG students. So without any delay, let me start with my presentation. It's already 11, so let me start with my presentation. I have a PPT, so let me go for a screen sharing. So let me start my presentation. So my paper for today is titled Reading Gender in Literature. So as this is particularly for UG students, I thought to begin by defining what is gender. So what is meant by gender? We can understand gender in different ways. Actually, we can define gender in relation with sex, like how gender and sex are connected. Is there any connection at all? We can define gender that way. We can understand gender as a social construct, like how gender is something that is socially constructed, how it is imposed us on through social institutions. We can also understand gender as a cultural construct. We can understand it as a performance. But these various understandings of gender develops through various evolutionary stages of feminism. So to understand these various the constructions of gender, we should go through various stages of feminism to see how the meaning of gender varied from time to time. So first, let's start from defining or differentiating sex and gender. So what is sex and what is gender? Sex is what is biological difference between males, and I'm talking only about conventional understanding. So sex generally refers to biological difference between males and females. If we check many languages like even Malayalam or Hindi or any other languages, we can see that these two terms, sex and gender, were used interchangeably. Like what to say, that there is no separate term for gender. Genderന് അങ്ങനെ പ്രത്യേകമായ ഒരു ടേം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. സെക്സിന് ഉപയോഗിച്ചിരുന്ന അതേ ടേം തന്നെയാണ് ജെൻഡറിലും. സോ ഇറ്റ് വാസ് യൂസ്ഡ് ഇന്റർചേഞ്ചബിളി. There is no differentiation at all. But we can find a differentiation that gender is something like a line of demarcation between these two sexes, which is based on behaviors and competences. Like certain behaviors and competencies are defined as masculine, and certain behaviors and competencies are defined as feminine. So gender is that line of demarcation, and this line of demarcation is rooted in a concept which is called gender essentialism, which believes that these difference in behaviors of men and women are innate, are permanent, which got biological or psychological reasons. Okay, so this is how gender and sex is like defined conventionally. So I hope you understood what is sex and what is gender, how it is connected. So at the beginning stages of feminism or feminist movement, this activists or scholars were not much concerned about differentiating between what is sex and gender. Sex and gender തമ്മിലുള്ള വ്യത്യാസം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ this line of demarcation is not that a concern of scholars or activists at that time. So when we look at women's movements at early 18th century, 19th century and early 20th century, we can see that they were more concerned about issues of equality and opportunity for women. They were fighting for legal rights and political rights. They for equal opportunity for education and for a job, a basic right of vote, equal pay for equal work, property right. These were concerns of feminist movements at the beginning, and we can connect that with the ideals of liberal feminism. So we can see that liberal feminists of 18th, 19th and early centuries were asserting, like they were speaking more about women's ability and right to participate in public life. They wanted more a space equal to man in public life, and they were questioning the institutions of marriage and the family structure, how unequally it is dividing the space for men and women. So basically, the liberal feminism is concerned about these rights like property laws, and you can see they were also concerned about equality in education, because the subjects which are meant for men, there were divisions like that. The subjects which are particularly meant for men, and certain subjects are meant for women. So there is no equal access to all education and to all professions. So they certain opportunities are denied for women. So they were demanding that rights, equal rights. They don't want to live as dependents but as independent women. So when we look at the beginning stage of feminism, women's movement, which we can connect with liberal feminism, their concerns were more about rights and opportunities. They are not that bothered about this line of demarcation that we call as gender, or the division between sex and gender. But this altogether changes with before defining that, let me go to a work, Room of One's Own. Why I choose this work here is because a portion of this is a chapter of this is in the syllabus of UG of MG University, where you have Shakespeare's sister. So this work we can connect with the ideals of liberal feminism, and Virginia Woolf's work, as we can see, it's connected with her own life. So she is speaking about her lived experience of 19th century, where there is division in education on the basis of gender, like boys of the family and girls of the family are not equally educated. They are not given equal opportunity for education. Boys are sent to Cambridge University while girls are educated by parents. So that kind of difference were there. So she is projecting that difference in opportunity and an unequal treatment that she experienced in 19th century to a Elizabethan space or Elizabethan character, an imaginative character, Judith, whom she imagined as a sister to Shakespeare. So that is the part you have to, UG students have to study in your syllabus. So we can connect the ideals in that Room of One's Own with that ideals of liberalism. So why she is discussing is with an idea of achieving gender equality through political and legal reforms, because Virginia Woolf was directly connected with members who were actively participating in women's movement. So her idea was her works were meant for this political and legal reforms. So she is imagining a character called Judith, who is equally talented like Shakespeare, living in an Elizabethan age, who is denied of opportunities like Shakespeare. So there we can discuss the difference between the private sphere and public sphere. These two terms are very popular, very much connected to feminism, especially at the beginning phases. So what is private sphere? Private sphere is this family space which is regarded as the proper place for woman, like she is tamed and trained to fit into this proper place of private sphere, where the public sphere is not a space for her. She is always marginalized, and as when you read that, you can see what is the tragedy of Judith at the end. Like she is invisible and unknown. So that is the condition, that is how the public sphere is framed to exclude women from all its activities. So this difference of treatment in public sphere and private sphere is something that is discussed in a room of one's own in Virginia Woolf. So we can read that within liberal feminism, or we can connect that with first wave of feminism, where this division between gender and sex is not much a concern. But this altogether changes with the publication of Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, which was published in 1949, where she brings an alternative to gender essentialism. Gender essentialism, as we defined, where it believes that this line of demarcation between the behaviors and competencies of masculine or feminine are something that is innate, something that is born with. But she finds that it in her statement, it is like one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. So it states that it is not something that is innate. So it is an alternative to gender essentialism. She finds that it is this femininity, that quality of being a woman or being a female does not arise from biology, psychology, or it is not something that is intellectual, but instead it is a construction of civilization. It is constructed in societies through civilizations. It is not something that is essential, but it is difference is maintained through situations. So that is her findings, and how she describes it is like a girl is tamed to a woman through her upbringing. That is, she is shaped to be a woman through her upbringing. And she also finds that all that institutions and all that discourses that are in society are centered on men, are with reference to men, and she is always defined as an other. So man is the subject and she is the other. So that is how she finds gender as a social construct. So it is not as something that is essential, but it is a social construct. It is society through various discourses and institutions that that make a woman woman, or femininity is something that is imposed on female, and this marks the beginning of what we call as the second wave of feminism. So this difference in understanding gender as a social construct marks the beginning of what we call as the second wave of feminism. So here again, I thought to discuss this Second Sex of Simone de Beauvoir in detail, not in that detail, but to introduce that, because a part of this is also there in your syllabus, where she discusses gender in relation to historical materialism is there in your syllabus, I think. So what is Second Sex of Simone de Beauvoir? Second Sex of Simone de Beauvoir is just study of human history from a feminist perspective. She is trying to understand human history from a feminist, from a female point of view. And as I already told, this was published in 1949 and in 2 volumes. It is divided. The Second Sex is divided into 2 volumes. The first part is called Facts and Myths, and the next part is called Lived Experience. So what she did in that? So in the first part, Facts and Myths, she is discussing what is meant by woman, what is woman, and she finds that and she turns to, like, she studies biology, she looks at psychoanalysis, and she also studies historical materialisms to see how woman is defined in all these work. And she finds that in all these disciplines, without any without questioning, they are accepting that men and women are different, and men and women is always inferior. It is taken for granted in all these disciplines. And to understand why it is so, she traces history, and she also studies mythical representation. And she finds that in all these mythical representation, women are represented as eternal feminine, with all that feminine qualities that a male society wants is there in this eternal feminine concept. And she finds that these qualities of eternal feminine is reinforced, is supported through all these disciplines of biology, psychoanalysis, and literature without questioning. So that is what she finds in the first part of her book, first part of the second sex. What she did is she studied all these disciplines, varying disciplines, science like biology or psychoanalysis, and history like historical materialism, and she even traces myths and finds out that how these eternal feminine concept is reinforced through all these disciplines to maintain the inferior status of women. So in the next part, in the lived experience, she discusses about the social conditioning, like how girls and boys are differently treated in family, and how this feminine identity is imposed on a woman by society. For that, she discusses various stages of a woman's life, like she discusses about puberty, she discusses about menstruation, she discusses about a stage when she falls in love with a man, and she finds that in all these stages, a woman who is shaped to be a woman, like who's supposed to be a woman, through thousands of external forces. Like she is not born feminine, but shaped by thousands of external processes to be external forces to be feminine. She also describes pregnancy, and you should note this, like she defines pregnancy as something that is like a curse. When male-centered society describes it as a gift, she expresses it both as a gift and a curse in her second sex. And we can also find that Simone de Beauvoir in this part of lived experiences analyzes all that roles done by a woman throughout her life. And what is her finding is that all that negative qualities that are imposed on woman, like what her laziness, her passivity, her mediocrity, or everything are something like are just consequences of her subordination, but not cause, as male-centered society defines. Male society defines that because of these laziness and passivity, they are in subordinate position. It is because of their biology, they are in subordinate position. But she defines it that it is not, it is just a result of this subordination. It is not the cause of this subordination. In this work, she also finds out the economic roots. How a woman want to be economically independent, to free herself. She also discusses that in second sex. So this is what second sex is, and a portion of it is there in your syllabus, where the discussion is about historical materialism. So this is second sex, which is divided into two parts: facts and myth and lived experiences. And this is how she explains how gender is a social construct, not something that is innate. Okay, I hope you understood this part. And influenced by Simone de Beauvoir's second sex, there comes another work of Betty Friedan, which is also there in your syllabus, The Problem That Has No Name. So Betty Friedan, who was an American, who started, we can say it is with her the publication of her work Feminine Mystic that the second wave feminism started in United States, which was published in 1963, that the second wave of feminism began in United States. So now you have this essay, The Problem That Has No Name. So what is that problem? So in that, by this term feminine mystic, Betty Friedan is describing a kind of dissatisfied existence of women, especially women in mainstream American society in the post-Second World War period. So what is that? So to understand that, we should understand the American situation at that time. So we can see that in 1920s, these women, after this women's movement and all, the women movements and all, were acquiring independence in many different ways. They are getting jobs, they are getting educated, they are sharing all that Victorian values that are on them. But and with Second World War, what happened is, like, all eligible men had to go for military service. So all eligible men went for military service. They joined military. So what happened is, women got more space. They started taking jobs which were once male dominant. Like, they started doing jobs in factories. They started they started clerical jobs. They started playing baseballs and all that things, mechanical jobs. So they started doing all that jobs which were once meant for males only. But after war, when men returned, the women have to give up these roles, and they are forced to give up these roles and to again confine themselves in housework, marriage, and this role of child rearing and all. So this created a kind of dissatisfaction. So this created a kind of dilemma, like a kind of psychological problem for women to experience independence and then getting back to the space, to a private space, like to experience the public sphere and then getting back to this private sphere. So to get educated but have to confine themselves to the role or to the domestic role. So this created a kind of dissatisfaction among women, and this is what Betty Friedan defines as the problem that has no name in her work, Feminine Mystique. And an example for that is Sylvia Plath. Sylvia Plath is also the renewal syllabus. That's why I choose her. We can say that she is a byproduct of that era, of this era that Betty Friedan is describing, of that condition which Betty Friedan is speaking about, because she she had to she was a was a creative writer. She had all that qualities to live in the public sphere, to achieve fame and all, but she had to confine herself to the domestic sphere. And what happens is, like, American society insisted through various institutions and various discourses, insisted that a woman finds fulfillment in marriage and housewifery, like to live as a wife and to be in married relations, to rear children, is something that makes a woman happy. That is an idea that was projected in American society at that time, and every woman of that time interpreted it as their own individual problem. They don't find it they don't find it as a collective issue, but find it as an individual problem, their own psychological problem. So that is why Sylvia Plath was also taking psychological treatment for her mental illness. So this is a quote from Sylvia Plath, where she describes her condition. Let me read that. The future, God, will it get worse and worse? Will I never travel, never interrogate my life, never have purpose, meaning, never have time, long structures to investigate ideas, philosophy, to articulate the vague seething desires in me? Will I be a secretary, self-rationalizing, uninspired housewife, secretly jealous of my husband's ability to grow intellectually and professionally while I am impeded? Will I submerge my embarrassing desires and aspirations, refuse to face myself, and go either mad or become neurotic? So this statement clearly pictures what was the condition of all other women in American society at that time, especially creative women like Sylvia Plath. And you have Lady Lazarus to study in your syllabus. For UG students, you have Lady Lazarus, where she clearly pictures oppression and humiliation that women faces in a patriarchal society. And she also portrays the struggle of an artist to achieve an autonomy, how to achieve her identity in a patriarchal society. And you can see that her poems are categorized under confessional poetry. So the confession, the term itself carries guilt, kind of guilt feeling. And these poets or these women were living with that guilt feeling because they felt like to do all this domestic job is something that is their duty, their responsibility. At the same time, they wanted to be creative and independent. So their life is this struggle between these two dual roles. And that anchor that is in that poet is in the last line where it says like eat men like air, where she want to take revenge against the whole men, all male-centered society, which put them in this situation, which put them in this crisis of identity crisis, where they find it difficult to place them in both public or private spheres, where they had no other choice than killing themselves. Okay, so that's why the discussion of suicide is there from the beginning to end. So this is there. So you can place this poem, Lady Sylvia Plath, under second wave feminism, or under the understanding of gender as social construct, where gender is imposed, femininity is imposed on women through social institutions, so through various social discourses. So that is the next understanding of gender as a social construct. Next, we can discuss gender as a cultural construct. At the these ideals that is associated with second sex, Simone de Beauvoir, and many works. The three prominent works which were written written during this second wave feminism is one, Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir, next is Feminine Mystic by Betty Friedan, another one is Kate Millet's Sexual Politics. So these three works, but feminists or women of color find problems with this early stage of second wave feminism, and they accused it of being elitist and ignoring the experiences of women of color. It is particularly speaking about white women or upper middle class women, and they are not addressing the problems of women of color. They are not addressing the transgender women. They are not addressing varying sexualities like lesbians or bisexuals. They are just focusing on white middle class and cisgender women, not on transgender, not on women of colors. So what happened is in the later stage of second wave feminism, by 1980s itself, the black feminists, like Barbara Smith started discussing about identity politics. The identity politics means that identity of a person is defined through varying experience, like the religion which a person belongs to, the race, class, the society, social backgrounds, the space in which he is, ethnicity, everything defines one's experience. So we universally describing a female experience of is not correct, because these kind of experiences which are marginal are muted or are marginalized. So are marginalized. So they started focusing on identity politics and started bringing attention to identity politics. An example of that is a work of Bell Hooks, which is titled "Ain't a Woman? Black Woman and Feminism," which is published in 1981. This title itself is something interesting, because "Aren't I a Woman?" is actually a speech by Sojourner Truth in 1851, I think. That is a speech by Sojourner Truth pointing towards her body. When all these feminism were discussing about the white fragile white woman and their experience, about their life within the domestic spheres and all, they are not discussing about slave woman or their experiences, their black body with long with big hips, and they are not discussing about their black features. So she is pointing towards her own body and is asking like, I a woman. This usage itself is something that is important, because this is Afro-American kind of English usage, and I a woman is an Afro-American kind of English usage. To bring that to the title itself is it got its own politics to bring to forefront the problems of black women. So Bell Hooks uses that title in that usage for the title of her book in 1981, which where the discussion on identity politics starts. So with that, our understanding of gender just as social construct ends, and we start understanding gender as a cultural construct too. So which marked the beginning of various indigenous feminisms like black feminism, post-colonial feminism, womanism, Islamic feminism, and many more, like the Latin American feminism, like there are Arabian feminism, and there are many more feminisms which started. So started with the result of understanding gender as a cultural construct. So within this black feminism or understanding gender as cultural construct, you have the work of Barbara Smith in women's writing. I think you have the text or The Truth That Never Hurts, Writings on Race, Gender and Freedom by Barbara Smith. So about Barbara Smith, she is a black American, a lesbian feminist, socialist. Like she played a significant role in bringing feminism, black feminism, to forefront in United States, and she is the first one to coin the term identity politics. Identity politics, where she says that the gender experience is not just a social construct. We need to consider all other cultural constructs like religion. We need to consider the experience of race, ethnicity, class, and all other things. We need to consider everything in discussing one's identity. So she coined the term identity politics to explain that. And she also finds that, because as I told, Sojourner Truth, she made this speech in like in the end of 19th century, but it was not addressed. So when there was a women's movement, black women were participating in the movement. They were also giving strength to the movement for equal rights and all, but their needs were ignored. And even in the literary history, we can see that they were ignored. Even though they were actively participating, they were ignored, and their needs and their space, they are actually invisible in all these movements, although they were participating. So, this Barbara Smith took she had a great role in actually bringing to forefront the authors like Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, and Amy Tan. Like Alice Walker, the word color purple is there in your syllabus. I think this text, The Truth That Never Hurts, is there for you to understand the black feminism within Alice Walker's Color Purple. So the Color Purple, you can read that novel from a black feminist perspective, especially in you can read that the identity politics that is there, and also we can read lesbian elements in that novel as well. So we can say that it is Barbara Smith who like not just discussing the race or class in relation with gender. She also brings sexuality in gender discussions, as she is a lesbian. I hope you know what sexuality is, like how one define one's how one expresses one sexually, like as lesbian or heterosexual, homosexual, or as bisexual. So that is the sexuality. So she brings that discussion of gender and gender and sexuality together, as she herself is a lesbian. And this quote or this sentence, which is in bold, is the condition or that is the condition that was addressed by black feminists. So it says that black is always equated to black men. So there were movements for rights or for black people, but that was more concerned about men and their issues. And when it comes for feminism, woman was equated with white women. So the issues that were discussed within feminism are concerned more about white women. The black racial movements were concerned about black men, and feminism were concerned about white women. So the result is black women were an invisible group whose existence and needs were ignored. So to address that, this black feminism emerged. So they focused on cultural constructions of how gender is culturally constructed. So that marks the different understanding of gender. So we discussed three different ways of understanding gender now. So at the beginning, we saw gender as something that is essential. There is where sex and gender are connected permanently. There is where the sexual behaviors are define something as innate and permanent. And the second phase, we saw gender as social construction, where through social institutions or through social outside forces, a woman is forced to remain as a woman. So that is social construction. And in the last part, we learned how gender is a social construct. That is how the varying forces, like varying what is varying identities a person got, like the racial identity, ethnic identity, all that clubs together to create an identity politics. And the gender, we cannot define gender without addressing this identity politics. That is that gives us a cultural understanding of gender. So from this we can move to gender as performance. But with the publication of Gender Trouble by Judith Butler, which was published in 1990, the understanding of gender within feminism changed altogether, where she defined gender as performance, or the term she used is gender performativity, which is performative or performativity. That is the term that she created. And in that Gender Trouble, she begins by critiquing the idea of female identity created by feminists, especially Simone de Beauvoir, where she finds that the ideas of female identity put forward by these feminist scholars are rooted in the Western philosophical thoughts of mind-body structure, where mind is always equated with masculinity and the body is something that is equated with femininity, something that is to be termed, which got its root in Plato, that idealism, or what we call the mind, which is otherwise I can explain it in sorry, I will explain it in differently, because in mind and body structure, feminists or Simone de Beauvoir says that a female can intellectually be equal to men, but body is something that is an obstacle for a woman. That is, body is something that is a problem for women. That is how she finds body in this second sex. It is there that Judith Butler finds criticism, like problem with, where she finds that equating female body, femininity with body, and finding body as a trouble is the problem that is in the second sex, and that is there in the second sex. And what she argues that it is difficult to connect one's body, being a male or female, with a behavior, because for her gender is an act or a masquerade or a performance, which comes to us like rituals, like a girl becomes this is actually something it is a bit difficult to explain, because a girl becomes a girl or feminine when she performs or act to be a female or a woman, like she walks that way, she dresses that way, she talks that way, and she do these behaviors regularly or continuously, and it is that defines her gender. So and there are certain set of behaviors meant for girls and certain set of behaviors meant for boys. It is through this performance of these behaviors one becomes a particular gender. But Judith Butler finds that this is something that is to be something that to be questioned, and and she takes the example of drags, like drag means a man dressing like a girl, like a person who is supposed to perform like a man dresses like a girl and performs like a girl. So she says that this kind of subversive performance can alter, can damage this gender construct that is in the society. So for her, gender is performative or gender is an act. So I think we can understand this gender as performance from her own words. So I shared a YouTube link. You can play it later. It's actually a video where Judith Butler is explaining performative in her own words, like where it is through repeated behaviors or it is through repeated action that one becomes a woman and a man, and it is not necessary that one behaves that way throughout his life, the same way throughout his life. We can go we can alter that alter our gender through subversive performance. That is Judith Butler's idea of performance, and with that begins gender studies. With the publication of this Gender Trouble begins gender studies, where this binary of understanding gender as female and male breaks, and all that different genders like lesbians, bisexuals, transgenders, gays, queers, everything were included into the sphere of gender. Like every gender is just a performance, and to define it in masculine terms and feminine terms is something is not possible with Gender Trouble. And started gender studies and theory and the exploration in gender identities goes on even now. I think I can stop my presentation here, and if you have any doubts or questions, you can ask me now.
Thank you, Dr. Jamie, for that very comprehensive definition of gender and its varied social and cultural constructions. Now the platform is open for discussion. Participants can ask their questions to Dr. Jamie. Jamie, there's a question in the chat box. If you could just open it or should I read it?
Okay. I can see that the question is like prefer matriarchy over patriarchy. Okay, we cannot say that. As I told you, feminism is not a singular movement. Like it got different perspectives. Like its definitions varies according to the region in which it originates or where it functions. demands varies. The ideals of Dalit feminism is not that of black feminism, or it varies according to the situation in which, or the condition in which it is placed. So we cannot say that it prefers matriarchy over patriarchy. It's not something like that. We can see that at the beginning that was the demand. The demand is for equality. The demand is for some space. It is for equality, equal rights, for right for vote, and also to say that they prefer matriarchy over patriarchy or to that extreme, and there is no need of discussing it that way. There may be some feminists who prefer that. It's individual choice.
Ma'am, a question was asked, why women are better at negotiation than men?
Are women better in negotiation than men? I don't think that kind of question I can answer, sir. That kind of, it depends. Like it's subjective to see things in that way. To define, as I told, to differentiate things as women are better and men are not. It is not necessary to see things that way. That is not our idea. It depends. Like it depends on individual, like who is better.
Ma'am, another question was that do genders other than masculine and feminine too perform the gender roles assigned to them?
Yes, see, gender roles is not something that is assigned. That is what Judith Butler defines. It's something that performative. Like from my what we can say that it is not something that is assigned to them. Okay, it is something that is choice. It is through behaviors that we define our gender. Got it. So it is not necessary I perform a role of a heterosexual because the society demands that is something that is assigned to me. It depends upon my performance.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, the next question that was asked is, how do you address the issue of
glorification of women, or address the issue of glorification of women or womanhood? I didn't understand that. It is at the stage of the development of feminism. We can say that there is something called celebration of womanhood. It's actually a change from, as I told, like in the first phase of feminism, in the works of Simone de Beauvoir and Suella Firestone's work, like Dialectics of Sex and all, they gave a picture that the reproductive power capacity of women is something that is an obstacle, where she defined pregnancy as something like delivering giving birth to a baby is something like shitting a pumpkin. So they gave a negative image on that. But after there is a shift which is where it is called thinking through the body, where they wanted to celebrate female body, where a woman want to express her identity by expressing her body itself. That is actually a move in feminism. It is actually a developmental stage in feminism, which we can connect with radical feminism and all. But I didn't discuss that here because our focus is on gender and to define gender from different perspectives.
Ma'am, there is another question. What are the views of post-structural feminism and the new thoughts in feminism?
Post-structural feminism, yes, you can see that there's developments of the contributions of French feminists like A Creature Feminine by Helen Cixous and all are the contributions. But I didn't discuss that in this paper particularly because I don't want to discuss sexuality, so to confuse gender and sexuality. I don't want to discuss that. But there they actually focused on writing the body, writing the female body, where the language structure, the structure of the language as defined the patriarchy can be like redefined or deconstructed by writing the body, by writing the female body, expressing her own body experience in a language which is altogether different from the language which is defined by patriarchy. That marked the beginning of post-structural feminism.
There is another question. Are we addressing the gender in an appropriate way? If yes, why gender discrimination?
We are not addressing gender in a proper way, but we are learning to address gender in a proper way. So there is always discrimination because it got historical roots for that. So we are just trying to break it through our education. That is why various fields of interdisciplinary fields of studies are emerging, and that is why this seminar is for UG students. So from here you need to understand gender from different perspectives, not just in relation to sex. So you should understand gender in a more widest perspective. So that is why these disciplines, these subjects, these papers are incorporated in all these academic disciplines. And even as a reflection of that, you can see that in popular culture, in media and all, even though there are some negative depictions, there are attempts to give a positive representations for gender.
Miss, there is a question from YouTube.
YouTube, yeah.
How do transsexuals perform their gender, especially those transsexuals who identify themselves as a transsexual rather than binary gender category of man or woman?
Yeah, they perform it. That's why I told you it is not necessary they perform it in a singular way. When the term there is trans, it can be trans woman or trans man. It is not necessary like they perform it in a particular way that is defined with the conventional society. They can perform it. That is why the laws are changing. Even now we have seen how Kerala government have changed the rules of filling all that things. There are space. As the principal already said, they started giving more space for transgenders to define their roles, and even in the Supreme Court, we have seen that the intersexual, how legalized the marriage, the same-sex marriage is legalized. So in that way, the social perception is changing, and they can perform it in the way they like. They can. It is what we call as the gender political freedom, and how they perform or to define it within this structure of masculine or feminine structure is not possible, and it is not needed at all. It is not necessary to define it that way at all. How they perform it is they can perform it the way they like.
Ma'am, there is another question. Feminism is feminism is considered as a main topic to be discussed or studied. Did we can say that feminism is established in society in proper way actually, or is it just still stand like subject to be studied or to be researched or to be criticized by usual patriarchal society?
Yes, the image of feminism or feminism in the popular discourse is always created by the patriarchal society, male-centered society. So they create it in a very negative way. So as it is a marginal discourse, it is always difficult to get it a central space to address it in the way that what its idea is to acquire the political space that it requires. We cannot reach it the same way, but the struggle goes on, as we have seen through the evolution of feminism. It started as a movement from the right. From there it reaches the idea of performative, where gender is just a performance, where the very basic idea of masculine and feminine shatters, and it is with that reflection in society where we that laws are changing, the social perception is changing, they are in forefront. Like everything is changing. It is not something that comes all together. It's by stages it occurs. It will happen. This education, when we get educated, that will reflect in the society. Definitely it will reflect, and there will be the changes will be there, and we hope for that. That is why we are studying it in academics, or we are discussing that in spaces where we get.
There were two more questions.
Yes, it's just two more. We can go for that.
Okay, ma'am. Can we say that women are actually relieved by the return of men folk after the war so that they could have their normal lives back? How can we attribute the term frustrated in a general sense?
Yes, it's there because see, you are asking about. I think the question is about feminine mystique. So it's there because they to think that women are happy within private sphere is wrong, because they always wanted their space in public space, and they struggle for that. They led movements and they struggled for the equal rights, and because of the Second World War situation, they got that space, they enjoyed that, they had education in subjects which were once meant for male only, and they learned creative writing, they started expressing themselves. But altogether they have to stop this and to enter the sphere which is very which is dark for them, which is private, where they have to look the family and to admire their husband, to do the gender defined role for them. But that created the psychological issue within them. It is there, we can see that in the case studies, and that led to and Sylvia Plath, as I told, is a living the Sylvia Plath and her poems are examples for that. Examples for that particular feminine mystic. That is why that poem Lady Lazarus is in your syllabus, to understand the condition of feminine mystic, where they struggle between the social construct and their real identity. That struggle is pictured in that poem, and her personal life itself is that. That is why she wrote poems, is actually part of her treatment.
Okay, Miss. Another question is that, will you suggest some books which reveal more about new trend in feminism and the whole history of feminism too?
All history of feminism, like there are many feminist readers, like companions, Cambridge Companion for Feminism, Oxford Routledge Companion. So if you want to start your reading on feminism, you can start from a Feminism and Introduction, which is published by Routledge, and there are many other books. You can start from there, where these different waves of feminism are described. And you can see I describe feminism from a gender perspective, but there are various definitions of feminisms, or different stages of different ways in which the stages of feminism and its developments are explained. So you can start with that, companions or readers, as a beginner.
Jamie, your
Yes.
Your doctoral thesis was on the politics of the body, translating
Yes.
women's poetry. And
Yes.
then you actually went on to translate Frida Kahlo's very
No,
illustrated
it's not that way. Like, I translated before my PhD. See, I translated while doing my MPhil. I translated it along with my husband. Actually, our idea was to publish it as a book, but it was serialized in Deshabhimani in 2010 and all. In Deshabhimani, Varandipad, it was serialized. And then it was it was published as a book. So I did that before my doctoral thesis.
And I understand that the journal is a collection of her paintings, poems, and diary entries.
Yes.
And how difficult was the task of actually translating it?
At that time it was really, because I was interested, even not my MPhil, not my PhD. My MPhil was also in translation and body politics. So at that time I found it difficult, because things that are communicated in paintings are really are explained in words. So I thought that translation of mine was a failure. Actually, I thought, and even now I think that it's not that great. But anyway, it was serialized, and even I don't know, like, it was very much, it was actually difficult to discuss something that is in painting and in words into a translation. And my thesis is actually about this untranslatability of female body. And this experience with Frida Kahlo and her diary is even before my PhD thesis.
Okay, thank you so much.
A few thankful words from a grateful heart is more valuable than any reward. I'm delighted to invite the dynamic presence of our department, Ms. Estella Joseph, to propose the vote of thanks.
Dear all, good afternoon. I'm here to acknowledge the gratitude of the Department of English, Government College, Kottayam, to all the dignitaries and participants of today's lecture. Dr. Jamie Chitra, the speaker of the day, through her presentation gave us a very clear idea of gender, its definition. Then she discussed gender as a cultural construct, gender as a social construct. And I think, ma'am, your class was highly useful to all the students who attended today's session. So on behalf of the Department of English, Government College, Kottayam, and all the students, teachers, and research scholars who participated today's program, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you and wish you all the best in all your future endeavors. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Let me thank our principal, Dr. R. Prakash, who is our strong support and inspiration. Thank you, Prakash, sir. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all the teachers, research scholars, and students from various colleges and universities who attended today's webinar. I thank all our colleagues, especially the technical team who supported our department, Dr. Anish AU, Dr. Ranjit Mohan, and Mr. Sijo Matthew, who offered the technical support for the smooth conduct of this webinar. I thank our HOD, Somarajan sir, and my colleagues and our students who put in a lot of effort for the success of this program. I congratulate and thank the coordinator of this webinar, web series, Ms. Lakshmi PS. From the selection of the topic to the live streaming of the session, she organized everything very beautifully and systematically, and she was supported by our technical team of students. So thank you, Lakshmi PS. Thank you, our students, especially Seetu, Rosmi, Anaka, Akash, Farsana, Aparna, Asif, Ashudev, Anshu, and Asha Jasmine. Special thanks to Dr. Lakshmi Arnayar, who chaired the session. Thank you one and all. Hope you all have an enriching experience. We look forward to your participation in the coming sessions of this web series, which will be held in the months of February and March. Details will be shared in the WhatsApp group later. So thank you one and all. Thank you.